Unit 7, Sales Comparison Cost and Income Approaches.
Sales comparison approach. Usefulness of the approach. The sales comparison approach is usually considered the most reliable of the approaches for appraising single-family homes, in part because the intangible benefits of home ownership are difficult to measure by other approaches to value. Additionally, if the property being appraised is a vacant lot in an established neighborhood, the sales comparison approach is considered the most relevant approach. The sales comparison approach requires a small sample of comparable sales, 3 or 4 typically, and produces a single estimate of value. Rationale for the approach. The sales comparison approach to value is based on the theory that a knowledgeable purchaser will pay no more for a property than the cost of acquiring an equally acceptable substitute property. This is the basis of the principle of substitution. Recall from Unit 6 that the principle of substitution holds that when several goods or services offering similar benefits are available, consumers tend toward the one with the lowest price. The sales comparison approach is based on the premise that the value of a property can be estimated accurately by reviewing recent sales of properties, called comparables or comps, similar to the property being appraised, the subject property, and comparing those properties with the subject property. The sales comparison approach is based on 2 underlying assumptions. Market price is valid evidence of market value. A well-informed buyer will not pay more for a property than the price of equally desirable substitute properties. Elements of comparison. Challenges associated with appraising real property. If we were interested in knowing the market value of IBM stock, we would investigate the opening and closing prices per share and the number of shares traded on that particular day. The price at which shares of IBM stock are traded on a given day indicates the stock's market value at that point in time. We qualify our value estimate to a given point in time because anyone who observes the stock market knows that stock prices change continually. Because one share of IBM common stock is identical to every other share of the same stock, it is said to be a homogeneous product. Valuing a product that is identical to the others eliminates much of the uncertainty associated with adjusting for differences between similar but not identical products. Furthermore, because many shares of identical stock are traded freely in a centralized market, a stock exchange, the traded price is also the stock's current value. In the real estate market, we are interested in the transaction prices of real property. As with shares of stock, real estate values change over time. Typically, an appraiser is interested in what a property is worth today, but sometimes the appraiser is asked to estimate the value of a property at the time a death occurred, or some other point in time. For this reason, the effective date of the valuation opinion is the date that applies to the value estimate and must be indicated in an appraisal. Each property is unique, or heterogeneous, and real estate is traded infrequently. Consequently, we must compare a given property of interest, the subject property, with comparable properties that are not identical to the property of interest. This results in the need to adjust the transaction prices of traded properties to approximate the subject property's price. To make matters even more difficult, because of the limited market, an appraiser must rely on a small sample of traded properties to make value estimates as compared with the millions of shares of stock traded on a stock exchange. The process of estimating the value of real property using the sales comparison approach involves finding market transactions of properties comparable to the subject property. To be considered comparable, the transactions must involve transfer of the same property rights, or legal estate as the subject property, and they must have the same highest and best use. Also, the transactions must be the result of arm's-length bargaining. In an arm's-length transaction, the parties deal from equal bargaining positions. They act in their own best interests, and they are not subject to each other's control or influence. As in transactions between family members, the appraiser adjusts the transaction prices of the comparables for differences from the subject property to arrive at an estimate of value for the subject. Factors requiring adjustment, known as elements of comparison, comprise both transactional characteristics and property characteristics. Transactional characteristics. 6 transactional characteristics are listed here, followed by an explanation of each characteristic. Conditions of sale: financing terms, sales concessions, market conditions, personal property location. Conditions of sale: an appraiser must verify with one of the parties to a transaction the conditions under which the transaction occurred to determine whether it was an arm's length transaction or whether the parties to the transaction did not have relatively equal bargaining power. Sales between family members or business partners and transactions concluded under abnormal pressure. For example, foreclosures violate important assumptions regarding market value. See Unit 6. Because very little market evidence exists about how such conditions affect prices, appraisers avoid using these types of transactions as comparables. Financing terms: the financing a buyer and a seller agree to may influence the price paid for real estate. When a buyer receives typical financing based on current interest rates and terms from an institutional mortgage lender, the transaction is said to involve market financing. Non-market financing, also called creative financing or atypical financing, means that the buyer secures financing with terms other than market financing. Non-market financing may mean a different interest rate and other terms and conditions of the financing. According to USPAP guidelines, if the opinion of value is to be based on non-market financing or financing with unusual conditions or incentives, the terms of such financing must be clearly identified and the appraiser's opinion of their contributions to or negative influence on value must be developed by analysis of relevant market data. If a comparable transaction involved non-market or atypical financing, the appraiser may need to adjust the comparable sale price to reflect normal financing terms for the market. Non-market financing usually drives the price upward. The resulting transaction price is the sum of two values: the value of the real property and the value of the special financing. It is the appraiser's task to estimate the value of the non-market financing and adjust the transaction price downward to reflect what the comparable would have sold for with normal financing. Types of non-market financing include the following: mortgage assumption. In times of rising mortgage interest rates, it may benefit a buyer to assume the loan originally issued to the seller. In such a case, the buyer may be willing to pay a premium for the home in exchange for assuming the below-market interest rate loan. Seller financing. A seller may be willing to finance all or a portion of the purchase price at a below-market interest rate. Contract for deed. A seller may allow a buyer to purchase the property by making periodic payments. The seller accepts a down payment from the buyer and finances the rest of the purchase price. The seller retains title to the property until some future time, usually after the buyer has reduced the amount owed through principal payments over time. A contract for deed also is known as an installment sale contract or a land contract. In recent years, mortgage interest rates have been attractively low and stable, making the need for a financing adjustment less likely. However, even in times of low interest rates, a buyer may seek special financing concessions, such as seller financing, for example, due to a past bankruptcy, or seller assistance with the cost of discount points. Factors that affect the value associated with non-market financing include the interest rate, term, length of the financing period, and the amount of the down payment. An appraiser typically uses two methods of adjustment to estimate the effect of non-market financing. Market abstraction. This method involves locating several transactions of similar properties. Some transactions should have involved market financing and others are chosen because they involve the same type of non-market financing associated with the subject. The appraiser must adjust each transaction price to reflect the others except for financing differences, also called pair data analysis. Any remaining price difference is attributed to the non-market financing. Some obvious limitations to applying this approach exist. Several recent sales of properties similar to the subject property and to the comparables involving both typical and atypical financing must be available. Also, the type of non-market financing must match the atypical financing of the comparable, requiring adjustment. Finally, the abstracted adjustment is limited to the specific market from which it is derived. Cash equivalency. A method known as cash equivalency calculates the present value of streams of cash inflows or outflows by discounting them at appropriate interest rates. The resulting values are cash equivalent prices. The value of the financing adjustment is measured as the present value of the difference between the mortgage payment on the favorably financed note and the mortgage payment that would have been required had the rate been the current market interest rate. Sales concessions. Fannie Mae appraisal guidelines specify how sales and financing concessions are to be addressed in assignments that are subject to their guidelines. The appraiser must indicate whether any financial assistance, including loan charges, sale concessions, gift or down payment assistance, were paid by any party on behalf of the borrower. Comparable sales that include sales or financing concessions must be adjusted to reflect the impact, if any, on the sale price of the comparables based on the market at the time of sale. Examples of sales concessions include interest rate buydowns, seller paid loan discount points and loan origination fees, seller paid closing costs customarily paid by the borrower, refunds of or credit for the borrower's expenses, and inclusion of non-realty items in the transaction. If the appraiser is able to determine the cost of sales concessions, The appraiser must report the total dollar amount of all sale concessions paid by any party on behalf of the borrower, including any closing costs or other payments from the seller or other third party. Adjustments to the comparable sale prices for sales concessions are achieved using market abstraction and cash equivalency. Example: typically, seller paid points are deducted from the transaction price to yield the cash equivalent price. Appraisers, however, always must consider how seller paid points actually affected the market values of properties in a specific market. They must make certain that cash equivalency adjustments reflect market perceptions. Market conditions: a property that sold last month or last year may sell for more, or for less, today, even though the property itself has not physically changed. The criterion for making an adjustment for market conditions is whether the price paid for a comparable property, if the property were sold on today's market, would differ from the price paid at some other time. An adjustment for market conditions is required if, since the time the comparable sales were transacted, property values in a given market have either appreciated or depreciated. The date of sale and the market conditions adjustment are critical elements in determining an accurate value because the appraisal is based on a specific date. Effective date of appraisal: the comparable sales being considered must be analyzed by the appraiser to determine if there have been any changes in market conditions from the time the comparable went under contract to the effective date of the appraisal. This analysis will determine whether a time adjustment is warranted. Adjustments may be either positive or negative depending on the market changes over the period analyzed. Market conditions adjustments should be supported by other comparables whenever possible. The appraiser must provide an explanation for the market conditions adjustment in the appraisal report. The most common reason an appraiser cites for adjusting for market conditions is to compensate for inflation or deflation. However, even in stable economic times, market conditions may change due to investors' perceptions of the market, forces of supply and demand, tax law revisions, building moratoriums, changing local economies and diseconomies, and so forth. Successive sales analysis: changes in market conditions usually are measured as a percentage of previous prices. If a property's physical characteristics remain unchanged, analyzing two or more sales of the same property over a period of time indicates the percentage of price change. This technique, known as successive sales analysis, involves locating properties in the same neighborhood, market, as the subject property that have sold recently, within the last few years, two or more times. The repeat sales chosen for the analysis may vary in physical characteristics from the subject property. The most important element is that the sales occurred in the same marketplace. Therefore, location is a critical determinant of comparability for successive sales analysis. An appraiser should attempt to analyze several sets of sales to arrive at an appropriate adjustment for market conditions. An adjustment supported by just one set of sales is not reliable. Assume, for example, that you have located three successive sales in the same neighborhood as the subject property. Record the initial selling price, the resale transaction price, and the number of months between the initial sale and resale for each property. To obtain the percentage change of value, divide the resale price by the initial price, then calculate a monthly rate of change using the formula below. Formula: market conditions adjustment resale price. Initial sale price equals difference in prices percent initial sale price equals percentage change percent number of months between sales equals monthly rate of change. Example: calculate a market conditions adjustment for property A in the table above. $182,900 resale price $167,000 initial price equals $15,900 difference in prices $15,900 difference in prices percent $167,000 initial price equals 0.095296 percentage change 0.095296 percentage change percent 28 months equals 0.0034 monthly rate of change. Rounded to fourth decimal place. Calculate the monthly rate of change for properties B and C. Compare your results to the values in this table. The average monthly rate of change is 0.0036, 0.0034 plus 0.0033 plus 0.0040 equals 0.0107%. 3 equals 0.0036, or just over 1/3 of 1%, 0.36% per month. The average monthly rate of appreciation for property in this neighborhood is 0.36% per month. The monthly rate of change can be applied to past sale prices of comparable properties to determine the prices they should bring under current market conditions. Assume a comparable sold for $179,000 6 months ago. To calculate the adjusted sale price for market conditions, multiply the transaction price by 0.0036 times 6 months. $179,000 x 0.0036 x 6 months equals $0.0216. $179,000 x 0.0216 equals $3,866. Adjustment for market conditions, rounded to nearest dollar. $179,000 plus $3,866 equals $182,866. Personal property. Any tangible items not permanently attached to real estate are classified as personal property. Examples of personal property include furnishings, artwork, antiques, machinery, and equipment. When a comparable transaction includes personal property that is not common to the subject property, the comparable's price must be adjusted by the personal property's value. Condominiums located in coastal and southern Florida sometimes are purchased completely furnished. In such a situation, the value of the personal property, or chattel, is estimated, then subtracted from the comparable's transaction price. An appraiser must consider whether an item is personal property or a fixture to determine whether to include it in the real estate's value. Fixtures are items that originally were personal property but have been permanently attached to or made part of real property. Because the fixture is real property, its contribution to value is included in the value estimate. Also, any personal property to be included in the value estimate should be identified and described in the appraisal. The appraiser also must distinguish between fixtures and trade fixtures. A trade fixture is an article a commercial tenant attaches as a necessary part of the tenant's trade or business. It remains personal property, regardless of how the article is affixed. USPAP requires appraisers to identify any personal property, trade fixtures, or intangible items that are not real property but are included in the appraisal. Location. A property's location is judged in relation to comparable properties. Homebuyers consider proximity to employment, schools, shopping, and recreation when choosing a home. Other important locational considerations include the compatibility of land use and the quality of homes in the surrounding area. Principle of conformity and a sufficient buffer from external diseconomies, such as crime and highway noise, proximity to noxious odors, air traffic patterns, and hazardous waste sites can have a significant negative impact on property value. When homebuyers compare neighborhoods, the availability and quality of governmental services such as fire and police protection are important, as is the availability of municipal services such as public waste systems, natural gas, storm sewers, street lighting, and so forth. When describing a subject property's location, an appraiser should note the condition and quality of surrounding properties, the availability of utilities and transportation, and the proximity to external economies and diseconomies. Paired sales analysis. Paired sales analysis is a procedure used to adjust for a single characteristic. The appraiser pairs sales by similar property characteristics so that the comparable's transaction price can be adjusted to reflect a particular characteristic. If a comparable property is located in the same neighborhood as the subject property, it is likely that a location adjustment is not needed. It is possible, however, that the subject property and the comparable property do not share an equally desirable location within the same neighborhood. The appraiser can use paired sales analysis to adjust for the locational difference. For example, one may be on the outer perimeter of the neighborhood, where it is exposed to negative influences, such as proximity to a busy street. When a comparable is located in a different neighborhood, the appraiser must conduct a thorough analysis to determine whether the differences between the two neighborhoods affect the comparable sale price. The appraiser compares transaction prices of properties in the subject neighborhood with transaction prices of properties in the comparable neighborhood. It is recommended that the appraiser estimate locational adjustments by comparing recently sold properties that are similar in physical characteristics but have different locational characteristics. Example, assume that the subject property is located in the Milestone subdivision, developed by Robertson Development Company. Milestone is convenient to an elementary school, grocery stores, and other support services. The subdivision has an active neighborhood association, and the homes are well maintained. Milestone is buffered by a strip of environmentally protected land. The Clear Creek subdivision, also developed by Robertson Development Company, is very similar in character to the subject neighborhood. However, Clear Creek is not as convenient to schools and shopping, and it is not buffered by a natural habitat, making it more susceptible to road noise. The appraiser identifies pairs of very similar homes located in the subject property's neighborhood and in the comparable neighborhood. The appraiser compares home prices in the subject neighborhood with home prices in the comparable neighborhood to determine what price differential, if any, is associated with the different location. Because the same company built the homes in both subdivisions, the appraiser found comparable properties that are very similar in terms of quality of construction, floor plans, square footage, and so forth. Therefore, any price differential can be attributed to the different location. The appraiser uses the following procedure to estimate the price differential. Step 1. Locate a home in the comparable property's neighborhood that is similar to the subject property. This is called a matched pair. The appraiser must adjust for any differences in physical characteristics so that the two properties differ only in terms of location. Step 2. Locate at least one additional matched pair. Adjustments based on a single matched pair are not reliable. Step 3. Calculate the difference in transaction prices between the properties identified in the two locations. Refer to the text box below. Step 4. To calculate the percentage difference for each pair, divide the price difference by the smaller of the sale prices. Refer to the text box below. Step 5. Calculate the average price difference by averaging the two percentage differences, 8.02% plus 8.18%. Percent 2 matched pairs equals 8.10%. The appraiser concludes that a home in Milestone sells for about an 8% premium, as compared with the home in Clear Creek. Property characteristics. Examples of property characteristics that may require a value adjustment include age and condition of the improvements, size, square footage of the improvements, number and size of rooms, type and quality of construction, age and condition of mechanical systems, age and condition of the roof, architectural design, amenities such as fireplaces, spas, and pools, and physical site characteristics, including size, shape, topography, and quality of landscaping. An appraiser should attempt to locate comparable transactions of properties similar to the subject property in terms of physical characteristics. Particularly desirable are comparables that agree with the subject property in terms of size, number of rooms, and age. The appraiser should derive any adjustments for physical characteristics from market evidence. The appraiser gives each significant physical difference a positive or negative dollar value or assigns it a relative percentage adjustment. Any adjustment is a value difference. It is not based on cost. Matched pairs analysis. The preferred method of estimating adjustments is to extract the adjustment amount from the market using matched pairs. Matched pairs analysis involves selecting pairs of sales in the market, one with the item for which the appraiser seeks the adjustment and the other without the item. The theory is that if a single characteristic is the only difference between two sales, the difference in the two transaction prices can be attributed to the isolated property characteristic. Example: assume the subject property is a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, split-plan home with an in-ground concrete pool. The homeowners enlarged the 4th bedroom to make a spacious home office. The home is situated on a corner lot. The appraiser has located two comparable sales in the same subdivision, both situated on interior lots. The comparables share the same floor plan, so they are similar in terms of physical characteristics. One of the comparable properties has an in-ground pool, the other does not. To extract the value of the pool, the appraiser deducts the smaller sale price from the larger one by subtracting the $135,000 sale price from $150,000. The appraiser attributes the $15,000 difference to the pool's value. It may have cost $20,000 to install the pool. However, market evidence indicates that buyers in this marketplace are willing to pay only $15,000 for the amenity. Assume that the appraiser locates a third comparable transaction in the same neighborhood. It also has a pool and is located 1 block from the subject property on a corner lot. By comparing this property, let's call it property C, with property A, the appraiser isolates the value difference for the corner lot. The appraiser extracts the value difference for the corner lot by using property A as the base sale. The premium adjustment is $7,000 for the corner lot. To derive an adjustment for the additional square footage in the subject's 4th bedroom that the homeowners use as an office, the appraiser locates comparable property D in the same neighborhood. It is similar to property B except that it has an extra 300 square feet of living area. The price difference for square footage is $18,000 divided by 300 square feet, or $60 per square foot. The appraiser uses this unit of comparison to make size adjustments. When projecting price adjustments for size, the appraiser must consider the principle of decreasing returns. The contribution of added square footage tends to be smaller than the contribution of the previous footage. Value increases as size increases to a point, but eventually the structure becomes over-improved in relation to its surroundings. Therefore, the appraiser takes into consideration the square foot adjustment in relation to the surroundings. Depreciated cost and capitalized rent differences. Although the generally preferred method of estimating adjustments is to extract the adjustment amount from the market using matched pairs, the marketplace often does not provide sufficient sales data to make the process straightforward. The method is often impractical because only a limited sampling of sufficiently similar property is available. Furthermore, an adjustment for a property characteristic derived from a single pair of sales may not reflect the appropriate adjustment, just as a single real estate transaction may not reflect a property's market value. For these reasons, the appraiser may look to other types of analysis to give more credibility to the value adjustment. Two alternative approaches are described here. Depreciated cost. This method utilizes construction costs as well as depreciation estimates. The appraiser calculates the cost of an element of comparison and then deducts depreciation from the item to arrive at the depreciated value of the element of comparison. Capitalized rent differences. This approach is based on the premise that difference in property features are reflected in the amount of rent a property can generate. The appraiser estimates the difference in rent similar properties generate based on an element of comparison, such as an extra bedroom, and then capitalizes the rent difference into value. This method is best used for properties in a market where there is reliable rental data. Adjustments. The appraiser adjusts the transaction prices of actual sales of comparable properties for transactional differences and property differences to and for the value of the property of interest, called the subject property. The adjustments are made to each comparable property, not to the subject property. The intent is to adjust the comparable property to make it as similar to the subject property as possible. If a comparable property is inferior to the subject property regarding a given feature, a positive adjustment is made to the comparable property. Add the value of the difference. Example: the subject property has a swimming pool. A comparable property does not have a pool. The comparable property is inferior to the subject property because it lacks a swimming pool. The appraiser increases the comparable's transaction price to reflect the pool's value. The appraiser adjusts the comparable's transaction price to estimate what the comparable property comp would have sold for if the property had been identical to the subject property. If a comparable property is superior to the subject property regarding a given feature, a negative adjustment is made to the comp. Subtract the value of the difference. Example: the subject property is a 3-bedroom 2-bath home. A comparable property is a 4-bedroom 2-bath home. The comparable property is superior to the subject property because it has a 4th bedroom. The appraiser decreases the comp's transaction price to reflect the extra bedroom's value. The appraiser makes a negative adjustment to the comp's transaction price to estimate what the comp would have sold for if the comp had been a 3-bedroom 2-bath home. Methods of adjustment: dollar and percentage adjustments. Adjustments can be made as percentages of sale price or as dollar value adjustments. Generally, dollar adjustments are preferred because they are easier to understand. Adjustments for market conditions, however, almost always are described in percentage terms, such as 6% appreciation per year. The appraiser applies percentages to the comparable property's transaction price to derive a dollar adjustment. Sequence of adjustments. The sequence used to make multiple adjustments should be logical. The Appraisal Institute developed a sequence of adjustments that is generally accepted throughout the appraisal industry. Normal sale price. The appraiser makes any necessary adjustments to a comp's transaction price for conditions of sale, financing terms, and sales concessions to determine a normal sale price. This is the price the property would have sold for at the time of the transaction if the transaction had been consistent with the market, e.g., typical days on the market, typical market financing, etc. Conditions of sale typically refer to an arm's length transaction. Assuming adequate sales in an area, the appraiser will avoid using sales as comps unless they are arm's length transactions, eliminating a market conditions adjustment. Financing adjustments and sales concessions reflect transactional characteristics of comparable properties that differ from the subject property. If the appraiser makes a financing adjustment, the appraiser must refer to the financing conditions obtained at the time the transaction occurred. Therefore, the appraiser makes any necessary adjustments for conditions of sale and financing, and sale concessions before adjusting for market conditions. Transaction price conditions of sale adjustment, financing terms adjustment, sales concession adjustment equals normal sale price, market conditions adjusted normal sale price. Next, the appraiser adjusts for market conditions. Change in value since date of sale. The appraiser applies the adjustment for market conditions to the normal sale price to derive a market conditions adjusted normal sale price. That is, the price the comparable likely would sell for in today's market. Normal sale price market conditions equals market conditions adjusted normal sale price final adjusted sale price. The market conditions adjusted normal sale price becomes the value base for adjustments for location and physical characteristics because these adjustments reflect today's value. The final adjusted sale price therefore represents the price that the comparable property likely would sell for in today's market if it were exactly like the subject property. Market conditions adjusted normal sale price location adjustment physical characteristics adjustment equals final adjusted sale price adjustment grid. The entire sequence of adjustments and the adjusted sale prices of the various comps are summarized in an adjustment grid like the one shown in adjustment grid. In adjustment grid, sales comparison approach, there are 3 adjusted sale prices. How does the appraiser decide the subject property's estimate of value? Reconciliation is the process of analyzing and effectively weighting the various comps to form an indicated value of the subject property. If the comparables are all equally suitable comparisons of the subject property, the appraiser may simply average the comps' adjusted sale prices. On the other hand, if the appraiser considers one comp to be a better indicator of the subject property's value than the others, the appraiser may weight the comp more heavily. The value conclusion. Note that, in the last row of adjustment grid, sales comparison approach, the appraiser reconciled the 3 comps into a single indicated value. Because comp 3 was considered most similar to the property being appraised, it received a reconciliation weight of 50%. This means that 50% of whatever the appraised value of the subject property is going to be should be based on the adjusted sale price of comp 3. Comp 2 was next in similarity and therefore was awarded a reconciliation weight of 30%. In each case, the adjusted sale price is multiplied by the reconciliation weight assigned, producing a part of the eventual reconciled value conclusion, which will be estimated market value of the subject property. The 3 reconciled values are added together to produce the sum of $138,014, which was then rounded to $138,000 indicated value. Cost approach. The cost approach is based on the theory that a knowledgeable purchaser will not pay more for a property than the cost of acquiring a similar site and constructing an acceptable substitute structure. Imagine a 5-year-old single-family home located in the Milestone subdivision. A buyer admires the house so much that she has the exact same one built on the vacant lot next door. The 2 homes are identical in terms of square footage, floor plan, and building materials. A single exception exists. One is new. Wouldn't the new home have greater market value than the 5-year-old twin? The older home will suffer some loss in value due to physical deterioration and obsolescence. The roof shingles are 5 years old. All of the appliances and mechanical equipment have endured 5 years of use, and the carpet shows signs of wear. Therefore, the appraiser must estimate the value associated with the difference in age between the 2 homes. The underlying assumption of the cost approach is that the cost to reproduce a structure new, less any loss in value due to the subject property's actual age, plus site value, produces a valid estimate of market value. Applicability of the approach. The applicability of each approach to value is related to the availability of market data and reliability of the estimates. Many reliable sources of cost data exist. However, estimates of accrued depreciation tend to be less reliable for older structures. Thus, the cost depreciation approach is most reliable for newer proposed construction and newer structures. The cost approach is especially applicable when the site value is well supported and the improvements are new or suffer only minor accrued depreciation. The cost approach is valuable when appraising owner-occupied residential properties located in an area characterized by very little market activity. Market activity is a must in obtaining reliable market data for the sales comparison approach. Furthermore, if the subject property is located in an area exclusively owner-occupied, it makes the income approach less applicable. Appraisers also use the cost approach to estimate the value of properties that are not exchanged frequently in the market, such as special purpose properties. The approach is applicable for insurance appraisals because the approach requires land and improvements to be valued separately. Appraisals for accounting purposes use the cost approach to estimate depreciation for income tax purposes. Learning objective distinguish between reproduction cost and replacement cost and describe the three methods for estimating cost. Steps in the cost approach. 4 steps in the cost approach: estimate the cost of improvements, estimate depreciation and deduct from cost, estimate site value, add site value and site improvements value to depreciated cost. New step 1. Estimate the cost of improvements. The appraiser estimates the current cost to reproduce or replace the building. Improvements being appraised. Reproduction cost is the amount of money required to build an exact duplicate of the structure being appraised. It includes the current cost of older construction methodologies and functionally deficient systems. Reproduction cost usually is required for condemnation appraisals. Replacement cost is the amount of money required to replace a structure having the same use and functional utility as the subject property, but using modern, available, or updated materials. Replacement cost is the dollar amount that would be required to construct improvements of equal utility to those being appraised, although not the exact physical duplicates. The appraiser estimates the cost of new improvements using modern design, materials, and technology. The major distinction between reproduction and replacement cost is that reproduction cost is defined in terms of a physical duplicate of the improvements, and replacement cost is defined in terms of utility equal to the subject improvements. Replacement cost assumes today's building technology. Therefore, adjustments for functional obsolescence necessary when the appraiser uses reproduction cost are eliminated when using replacement cost. From the appraiser's viewpoint, using replacement cost avoids the need to make time-consuming cost estimates of obsolete components found in older construction. Appraisers also argue that market participants think in terms of utility rather than cost when rating quality and design. When applying the cost approach to special purpose properties, older structures, or structures that incorporate materials that are no longer manufactured or are not readily available, replacement costs may be appropriate. Appraisers use 3 methods to estimate building costs. They are presented here from the most detailed to the least detailed method. Quantity survey method. This method involves a detailed inventory of all labor, materials, products, and indirect costs, plus the builder's profit required to reproduce a building. The appraiser multiplies the number of items in the inventory by the cost per item. For example, in a single-family home with 3 baths, the appraiser multiplies the cost of 1 commode by 3, the cost of 1 bathtub by 3, and so on. If 1,000 lineal feet of 2x6s are required at $1.50 per foot, the total cost would be $1,500. Unit in place method. The appraiser calculates the cost of materials and labor for each component of a structure, such as the driveway, parking area, roof, foundation, walls, and floors. For example, the appraiser obtains the unit in place cost for a square of roofing, 100 square feet, then multiplies by the number of units in the entire roof. Each separate component is treated the same way. Adding the costs of installed equipment and fixtures and builder's profit results in the structure's total reproduction cost. Comparative unit method, or square foot or cubic foot method. The appraiser multiplies the cost per square foot or cubic foot of a recently built comparable structure, or benchmark structure, by the number of square feet in the subject property. In practice, the comparative unit method is the most widely used method to estimate cost. The appraiser applies the method by referring to published cost manuals. In fact, reliance on these manuals to estimate reproduction cost dominates the appraisal industry today. Residential cost manuals contain benchmark structures for numerous categories of quality, such as low, fair, average, good, very good, and excellent quality. The appraiser compares the subject property with the descriptions of quality, factors such as basic shape of the building, type of roof and interior walls, and typical features and equipment, to determine the appropriate benchmark structure. The manuals provide illustrations of homes to help the appraiser choose the appropriate quality of construction. Once the construction quality is selected, the appraiser refers to square foot costs based on number of stories, e.g. 1-story or 2-story construction, and masonry or stud frame construction. The appraiser calculates a base cost for the structure by multiplying the square feet of living area by the cost per square foot. The appraiser then adjusts for foundation, mild Florida climate, for example, usually involves a negative adjustment because of lower floor insulation R-value standards, roof covering, flooring, garage, porches, and so forth. Once the appraiser has totaled all the calculations, a multiplier is applied to reflect local building costs. Estimation of reproduction cost using the comparative unit method provides an example of an estimate of reproduction cost using the comparative unit method. Accrued depreciation. Step 2. Estimate depreciation and deduct from cost. Depreciation is the loss in value due to any cause or condition that adversely affects the value of an improvement. Accrued depreciation refers to the total accumulated depreciation from all sources. The difference between the home's reproduction or replacement cost new and the perceived market value of the home today results from an improvement's accrued depreciation. The structure's reproduction cost is an estimate of the improvement value as if it were new. Deducting the accrued depreciation enables the appraiser to estimate the value of the improvements in today's marketplace, taking into account the condition and functionality of the structure. Generally, we think of accrued depreciation as associated with the structure's age. As a building grows older, it loses value due to exposure to the sun and rain and general use. However, not all depreciation is associated with age. A new structure may suffer functional obsolescence due to inefficient design. Also, a new home may be penalized because it is near a busy street. There are 3 major types of depreciation. Physical deterioration. This type of depreciation includes ordinary wear and tear caused by use, lack of maintenance, exposure to the elements, and physical damage. Brittle roof shingles and a worn-out central air conditioning compressor are examples of depreciation caused by physical deterioration. If correcting a defect increases the value of the improvement by as much or more than its cost, the depreciation is said to be curable. Physical deterioration that can be corrected at a reasonable and economically feasible cost is called curable physical deterioration. Example: the cost to have a home's exterior painted is estimated to be $2,000. However, a newly painted home that is otherwise in very good condition may bring approximately $5,000 to $7,000 added market value. The physical deterioration resulting from the need for the house to be repainted is an example of curable physical deterioration. Other examples of curable physical deterioration include, for example, replacing torn window and porch screens, replacing damaged roof shingles, or a rusty water heater. If the cost of repairing an item is greater than the value it adds to the improvement, the depreciation is considered incurable. Typically, incurable physical deterioration is physical deterioration that cannot be practically or economically corrected at the time of the appraisal. Example: an older structure has settling cracks in the walls and foundation. The structure is determined to be structurally sound. If the cost of jacking up the foundation to correct for the cracks is greater than the added value to the property, the defect is incurable. Functional obsolescence: anything that is inferior due to operational inadequacies, poor design, or changing tastes and preferences. For example, a poor traffic pattern, an outmoded design, too few bathrooms, or lack of closet space, is called functional obsolescence. An overimprovement also is considered functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence may be curable or incurable. Example: a home suffers from functional obsolescence because it has blue sculpted wall-to-wall carpeting. The carpet is in good condition with only minor wear and tear. Therefore, the carpet does not suffer from physical deterioration. However, the carpet is of a color and style that is not popular in today's market. The estimated cost to replace the carpet is $10,000. The market value of the home is estimated to be increased by more than $10,000 if the carpet is replaced with a good quality neutral color carpet. The functional obsolescence is curable. Example: a home has 4-year-old working kitchen appliances. The appliances are stainless steel and in excellent condition. However, the refrigerator does not have inlet or filtered drinking water, and more recent models of the same dishwasher feature less noise, a digital keypad, and greater energy efficiency. To replace the refrigerator and dishwasher with the latest model of the same brand would cost approximately $6,000. However, the appraiser estimates at the time of the appraisal that the market value of the home would not increase more than approximately $1,000 by replacing the refrigerator and dishwasher. The depreciation attributable to the kitchen appliances is incurable functional obsolescence, external obsolescence, any loss of value due to influences originating outside the property's boundaries. For example, an expressway adjacent to a residential subdivision, an industrial plant close to a residential neighborhood, or general deterioration of the neighborhood, is external obsolescence. Because external obsolescence is typically beyond the control of the property owner, it is considered incurable. External obsolescence is a unique category of depreciation because it does not result from inferior improvements. Instead, external obsolescence is lost value because of the property's surroundings. Unlike physical deterioration and functional obsolescence, the appraiser allocates external obsolescence between the land and the improvements. Only that portion allocated to the improvements is deducted from the reproduction cost of the improvements in the cost approach. There are three generally accepted methods of estimating the adjustment for accrued depreciation. Breakdown method. This method estimates each category of depreciation separately. The dollar amount, or sometimes percentage amount, of depreciation for each category of depreciation is estimated, and then the resulting dollar amounts of each classification are summed to determine the total amount of accrued depreciation. This method is complicated and detailed, leading to many adjustments, each of which can introduce estimation error. Market extraction method. This method incorporates information collected from the sales comparison approach. Market extraction works best if the appraiser does not have to adjust for physical differences. Ideally, the comps are located in the same neighborhood as the subject property to eliminate the need for an adjustment for external obsolescence. An appraiser locates suitable comparable sales and adjusts their transaction prices for market conditions, financing, and sale concessions, if any. Then, the appraiser subtracts the site value, leaving the depreciated value of the improvements for each comparable. The appraiser estimates the replacement cost new of each of the comps and subtracts the depreciated improvements to arrive at the accrued depreciation for each comp. The final step is to use the depreciation estimated for each comp, calculate a depreciated value per square foot for each comp, and then apply the market-derived square foot adjustment to the subject property. As with the previous method, the numerous adjustments may lead to estimation error. Age-life method. Most residential appraisals that employ the cost approach use the age-life method to estimate accrued depreciation. The method estimates a single value for accrued depreciation. It is appropriate for relatively new homes that do not suffer from significant functional and external obsolescence. Formula: age-life depreciation effective age % total economic life x reproduction, or replacement. Cost new equals estimated total accrued depreciation. The age-life method is based on a ratio of the subject property's effective age to its economic life. Effective age is the age indicated by a structure's condition and utility. Consider a residential home that chronologically is 15 years old. The home's effective age, however, could be greater than, less than, or equal to 15 years. The effective age is affected by the type and quality of construction, the building materials chosen, and the presence or absence of maintenance and modernization over time. No precise methodology exists for deriving effective age. It is approximated by taking into consideration the improvement's current condition. A structure's total economic life is the total estimated time in years that an improvement is expected to contribute to the property's value. Appraisers often use cost estimating services as a source of information regarding total economic life. The Residential Cost Handbook, by Marshall and Swift Company, for example, estimates the total economic life for residential homes in good condition to be about 60 years, 65 years for high-end homes. For investment properties, appraisers often use IRS guidelines as a source of information. Example: assume the appraiser estimated the subject property to have an effective age of 4 years after taking into consideration the home's current condition. The appraiser uses 60 years total economic life, 4 years effective age %, 60 years economic life, x $174,000 reproduction cost new equals $11,600 accrued depreciation. An alternative way to perform this calculation is to calculate the annual depreciation and multiply by the effective age. First, Divide the reproduction cost by the economic life to determine the annual depreciation. Multiply the annual depreciation by the effective age to derive the total accrued depreciation. $174,000 reproduction cost new percent 60 years economic life equals $2,900 annual depreciation x 4 years effective age equals $11,600 accrued depreciation formula. Accrued depreciation using annual depreciation reproduction or replacement. Cost new percent total economic life equals annual depreciation x effective age equals accrued depreciation applicability of the age life method. The age life method of calculating depreciation assumes that a structure depreciates at a constant rate. For this reason, the age life method is sometimes called straight line depreciation. Depreciation, however, does not necessarily occur at a constant rate. Also, because the age-life method lumps all three categories of depreciation into a single adjustment, it implies that functional and external obsolescence are related to a structure's age. As a home ages, it is more likely that mechanical and building components will suffer from functional obsolescence. Older homes also tend to be more susceptible to external obsolescence as nearby areas transition to changing highest and best uses. Under such conditions, it may be necessary to analyze the three types of depreciation separately. Consequently, the age-life method of calculating depreciation is more reliable when the property does not suffer significantly from functional and external obsolescence. Site value step 3. Estimate site value and non-structural site improvements value as if vacant at site's highest and best use. Land is valued as if vacant and available for its highest and best use, regardless of its present use. Land value is most often based upon comparable sales with a similar highest and best use. Sales of similar vacant parcels are analyzed, compared, and related to the land being appraised. Ideally, the appraiser analyzes sales of vacant sites that have recent market activity. Comparable sites should all have similar location, street paving, curbs, drainage, and so forth. The appraiser, however, may have to adjust for site improvements that are unique to a particular comparable site because of, for example, a swimming pool or a tennis court. If vacant sites are not available, the appraiser must extract the site value by studying comparable sales that have structures on them. Example, determine the estimated market value of a subject lot that is 110 feet by 120 feet, 13,200 SQFT. Comparable sales. Sale 1. A lot 100 feet by 120 feet located across the street from the subject lot sold recently for $42,500. Sale 2. A lot 110 feet by 120 feet in the same neighborhood as the subject lot sold recently for $45,000. Sale 3. A lot 100 feet by 100 feet in a different but similar quality neighborhood sold recently for $50,000. Sale 4. A lot 130 feet by 150 feet in different but similar quality neighborhood but located near a railroad sold recently for $39,500. Solution. Sale 1. $42,500 percent 12,000 SQFT equals $3.542 per SQFT. Sale 2. $45,000 percent 13,200 SQFT equals $3.409 per SQFT. Sale 3. $50,000 percent 10,000 SQFT equals $5 per SQFT. Sale 4. $39,500 percent 19,500 SQFT equals $2.026 per SQFT. Reconciliation. Sale 1. $3.542 per SQFT x.35 equals $1.240. Sale 2. $3.409 per SQFT x.30 equals $1.023. Sale 3. $5 per SQFT x.20 equals $1. Sale 4. $2.026 per SQFT x.15 equals $0.304. 100% equals $3.567 per SQFT. 13,200 SQFT subject lot x $3.567 equals $47,084 estimated market value. Note, in the reconciliation process, more weight was given to sale 1 because it was in the same neighborhood and across the street from the subject. Less weight was given to sale 3 because it was in a different neighborhood, and the least weight was given to sale 4 because it was in a different neighborhood but also was near a railroad. Step 4. Add site value and site improvements value to the depreciated cost new of the structure to obtain an indication of value. The appraiser estimates the site value of the subject property and adds the value of any site improvements, such as an outdoor kitchen, swimming pool, spa, and so forth. The site value and site improvements value is added to the depreciated cost new of the structure, resulting in an indication of value using the cost approach. Formula: cost approach, reproduction cost of the structure. Accrued depreciation equals depreciated value of the structure. Depreciated value of the structure plus site value equals indicated value of the subject property. Example: the total reproduction cost of the building improvements structure in estimation of reproduction cost using the comparative unit method was $174,218. Depreciation was estimated using the age life method, resulting in accrued depreciation of $11,600. The appraiser collected data on 4 comparable lots to estimate the market value of the subject lot. The prices per square foot of the 4 comparable lots were reconciled using weighted averaging, resulting in an estimated site value of $47,084 for the subject property. Using the formula for the cost approach, calculate the indicated value of the subject property. Income approach. The income approach is an appraisal method used to estimate the value of income-producing real estate. Basic concepts and uses of the income approach. The income approach is based on the theory that a knowledgeable purchaser would pay no more for a property than the present value of the expected future income generated from the property. Income property is valued by converting the anticipated income a property generates into present value. The income approach requires careful estimating of income, expenses, and a capitalization rate. The income approach is appropriate for income-producing properties including apartment buildings, retail properties, and commercial real estate. Gross income refers to income a property generates before deducting expenses associated with operating the income-producing property. We will begin with a discussion of valuing real estate using gross income. Gross rent multiplier. GRM analysis. A gross rent multiplier. GRM is the ratio between a property's gross monthly rental income and the sale price of the property. GRM analysis is appropriate when properties are purchased and sold on the basis of gross income. GRM analysis is usually reliable for valuing rental houses and small multifamily properties that earn income paid on a monthly basis. The GRM applies to rental income only. Monthly rental income is used to calculate a GRM. Step 1. Develop a market area GRM. To derive a GRM from market data, the appraiser must locate sales of comparable properties that generated rental income at the time of sale. The properties must be comparable to the subject property and to one another in terms of physical, locational, and investment characteristics. The comparable sales must exhibit gross incomes and operating expenses proportional to those of the subject property. If the proportion of gross income and operating expenses varies among the properties, gross income is not a reliable and consistent basis for setting prices. The comparable sales also must be traded in the same marketplace as the subject property. The same community and neighborhood forces must influence the subject property in the comparable sales. Multipliers are determined for a local area. A multiplier is market derived by using comparable properties and averaging the result. To establish a market-derived GRM, an appraiser must locate rent sales and rent data from at least 4 rental properties that are comparable to the subject property. The comparable rental property should be recent sales that were rented at the time of sale. Also, the sales must be open market transactions, and the conditions of sale should be verified. The sale price of each comparable rental property is divided by the property's gross rent to calculate each property's GRM. The individual GRMs are averaged to estimate the market area GRM. Formula: gross rent multiplier. GRM sale price percent gross monthly rent equals gross rent multiplier. GRM example: an appraiser has located 4 rental properties that are comparable to the subject property. The appraiser uses the sale price and monthly rent for each of the verified sales to develop a market area GRM. The appraiser calculates a GRM for each comparable property and then averages the GRMs to derive a market area GRM. 727.0. Sum of GRMs. Percent for comparable rental properties equals 181.75 market area GRM. Round to 182 GRM. Step 2. Estimate the subject property's market rent when applying the gross rent multiplier analysis. The appraiser estimates the value of the subject property based on the rental income potential of the subject property. It is important to distinguish between contract rent and market rent. Contract rent is the rent currently being paid by the tenants. Market rent is the rent that the property would command if it were leased today at the prevailing rate. It is not uncommon for a small rental property to be rented at less than market rent. It may be that the property owner has been reluctant to increase rents over time, or the owner is simply not aware of current market rental rates. To estimate the market value of an income-producing property, the appraiser will estimate the subject property's market rent. Step 3. Multiply the market rent by the GRM. The appraiser multiplies the subject property's estimated market rent by the market-derived GRM to obtain the subject property's indicated value. Formula: estimated market value using GRM. Market rent x market area. GRM equals estimated market value. Example: the appraiser estimates the fair market rent for the subject property to be $1,250 per month. An estimated market value of the subject rental property results from multiplying the subject property's market rent by the market-derived GRM developed in the previous example. $1,250 market rent x 182 GRM equals $227. 500 estimated value. Gross income multiplier. GIM analysis. The gross income multiplier. GIM is the ratio between a property's gross annual income and its selling price. GIM analysis is applicable for small income-producing properties that are bought, sold, and appraised on the basis of annual gross income. The approach is appropriate for small commercial properties, retail property, and warehouses. The procedure for calculating a GIM is basically the same as previously presented for calculating a GRM. However, the GIM refers to all income a property may produce, while the GRM refers to rent only. Also, the GIM typically uses annual income figures, whereas the GRM typically applies monthly rental income. Formula: gross income multiplier. GIM sale price percent gross annual income equals gross income multiplier. GIM gross annual income x market. GIM equals estimated market value. Example: a small commercial property produces $120,000 gross annual income. The property recently sold for $1,080,000. The appraiser applies GIM analysis to derive a gross income multiplier. $1,080,000 sale price percent $120,000 gross annual income equals 9.0 GIM. In this example, the small commercial property earns a gross annual income of $120,000 and sold for $1,080,000, resulting in a GIM of 9. In other words, the property sold for 9 times its gross income. $120,000 gross income x 9 equals $1,080,000. By studying the relationship of gross income to sale price of several income-producing properties of the same type in a given marketplace, an appraiser can calculate a market-derived income multiplier. For the next example, assume the market GIM is 9. Example: once a market GIM is developed, the appraiser estimates the market income for the subject property. The appraiser will consider the current income and potential income the property should generate. The appraiser estimates market value of the subject property by applying the resulting market area GIM of 9 and the gross annual income the subject property generates, or should generate with competent management, and so forth. For this example, assume the gross annual income is $115,000. $115,000 gross annual income x 9 GIM equals $1,035,000 estimated market value. Reconstructed operating statement. Recall that the GIM and GRM analyses use gross income to estimate value. For more complex income-producing properties, an appraiser uses net operating income to estimate value. The appraiser projects typical operating costs in the form of an operating statement. The appraiser collects information from the property owner and analyzes similar properties to better understand the income and expenses associated with the property. The appraiser uses the financial records and expense records as a guide to assist the appraiser in projections of typical management conditions for the subject property. The appraiser also studies the operations of similar properties when reconstructing the operating statement to ensure that the expenses are in line with those incurred by similar properties. The appraiser does research to develop an accurate estimate of net income the property should produce. Independent of a particular owner, the current owners may not be renting the subject property at the going market rate, and its current expenses may differ from market averages. Therefore, an appraiser evaluates all income and expense items in terms of market conditions. The process of estimating revenues and expenses for an income-producing property results in a statement of income and expenses that is applicable for appraisal, referred to as a reconstructed operating statement. Expenses that are included and excluded from the reconstructed operating statement. The income and expense information supplied by the property owner frequently is in the form of an income and expense statement prepared by an accountant or a CPA for taxation purposes. The appraiser reconstructs the income and expense statement into a reconstructed operating statement appropriate for valuation purposes. The expenses on the following list are typically included in a reconstructed operating statement: vacancy and collection loss, real estate taxes, hazard insurance, utilities, maintenance and repairs, janitor supplies, management. Net operating income for appraisal purposes focuses on the income produced by the property after operating expenses. Expenses that are not included in a reconstructed operating statement include the following: business income, tax allowable, depreciation of improvements for income tax collection, interest on mortgages or business loans. The NOI used in the income approach does not include mortgage payments and income tax payments. These expenses are personal and unique to each owner and are not directly related to the property's basic income producing ability. Developing a reconstructed operating statement. Estimate potential gross income, PGI, the maximum annual income a property would produce if it were totally rented or leased at the prevailing market rate is called potential gross income, PGI. The appraiser obtains the current rental rates, contract rent for the subject property's units by examining the leases. Recall that contract rent is the rent the tenants pay currently. The appraiser also analyzes data on past and current rental rates of similar properties and uses this information, along with contract rent information, to establish the fair market rent. Market rent is the rent the property would command if it were leased today at the prevailing rate. The appraiser uses market rent to capitalize value. Formula: potential gross income, number of units x monthly rent per unit x 12 months. Example: assume the subject property consists of 25 two-bedroom apartments that rent for $900 per month. 25 apartments x $900 per month, rent x 12 months equals $270,000. PGI estimate projected vacancy and collection losses. An allowance for reductions in potential gross income due to vacancies and uncollected rent is called vacancy and collection loss. The allowance is calculated as a percentage of potential gross income. When estimating an allowance, the appraiser should analyze the local market, taking into consideration the type and physical characteristics of the property, the quality of the tenants, and local supply and demand factors, such as typical occupancy rates for competing rental apartments. Vacancy and collection loss is not included in an accountant's income and expense reports. It is an item that the appraiser estimates and includes in the reconstructed operating statement. Formula: vacancy and collection loss, potential gross income, PGI, x estimated percentage for vacancy and collection loss equals vacancy and collection loss. Example: the appraiser projects a 5% vacancy and collection loss, $270. 000 PGI x 0.05 equals $13,500. Projected vacancy and collection loss. Subtract vacancy and collection loss to derive effective gross income, the anticipated income from the operation of a property less the vacancy and collection loss. Allowance is called effective gross income. EGI formula: effective gross income, EGI potential gross income, PGI, vacancy and collection loss equals effective gross income, EGI. Example: $270. 000 PGI $13,500. Vacancy and collection loss equals $256,500. Effective gross income, EGI estimate. Operating expenses. Operating expenses are classified into three types: fixed expenses, operating expenses that do not fluctuate with occupancy and must be paid whether or not the property is occupied are called fixed expenses. Real estate taxes and building hazard insurance are typical fixed expenses. Variable expenses, operating expenses that vary with the level of occupancy, are classified as variable expenses. Management, utilities, maintenance, and repair are examples of variable expenses. Even if the property owner manages the property, the appraiser should estimate a management expense. Management expense typically is expressed as a percentage of EGI. Based on typical local rates the appraiser obtains from property management companies. Utility expenses are projected on a year-round basis using past charges and current expectations. The appraiser should review leases to see whether tenants reimburse the owner for utilities and whether the tenant's utilities are individually metered. A large maintenance expense incurred only every few years, such as exterior painting, should be prorated over the normal cycle. Example, management is estimated at 4% of VGI, $256,500 EGI x 0.04 equals $10,260 management expense reserve for replacements, an allowance that provides for the periodic replacement of short-lived components, such as the roof and mechanical equipment, is called reserve for replacements. It is an allowance held in reserve until sometime in the future. Reserve for replacements is classified as an expense because the money will be expended in the future. For example, when the roof is reshingled or the mechanical equipment is replaced, the appraiser estimates the annual reserve for each short-lived item by prorating the replacement cost over the item's expected useful life. Short-lived items include items such as carpeting, kitchen appliances, and air conditioning units. Example, the roof shingles are expected to last 15 years and the replacement cost is $21,000. Calculate the annual reserve allowance. $21,000 replacement cost percent 15 years economic life equals $1,400. Reserve for replacements is treated as an expense for the purpose of calculating the net operating income. The reasoning is to eliminate large differences in the NOI from year to year that can be directly attributable to cash outlays. If the entire expense of replacing the roof were to be taken into account for purposes of determining NOI in year 15, the NOI would be decreased by $21,000 in that year. Obviously, this would result in a much lower appraised value. Recall that NOI is used to estimate value, than if the NOI were reduced for this expense by only $1,400. Thus, treating reserve for replacements as an operating expense provides a much more accurate picture of the day-to-day operating expenses needed to maintain the property and results in a more realistic appraised value. Operating expense categories. Fixed variable reserve for replacements. Example, assume the following expenses associated with the subject property. Deduct operating expenses to determine net operating income. To determine the net operating income, the appraiser subtracts the annual operating expenses from the EGI. Net operating income, NOI, is the income remaining after all relevant operating expenses have been subtracted. The appraiser should obtain information regarding the subject property's operating expenses from the owner's ledgers or another reliable source. Operating expenses used in the income approach are forecasts of anticipated expenses. Therefore, they should not be based solely on past expense history. The appraiser studies comparable investment properties' expenses to determine the appropriateness of expense projections. Formula: net operating income effective gross income operating expenses equals net operating income. NOI example, using the figures for effective gross income and operating expenses calculated in the previous examples, determine the net operating income $256,500 EGI, $94,060 operating expenses equals $162,440 NOI formula, reconstructed operating statement potential gross income, PGI, vacancy and collection loss equals effective gross income, EGI, EGI operating expenses equals net operating income, NOI, reconstructed operating statement presents an example of a reconstructed operating statement. Overall capitalization estimating an overall capitalization rate from market data. An overall capitalization rate is the percentage relationship between a property's expected annual net income and its value. The appraiser analyzes comparable investment properties to derive an appropriate capitalization rate for the subject property. The appraiser may review appraisals of other investment properties because the income data, NOI, has been projected in the appraisals. The appraiser divides each comparable investment property's NOI by its corresponding market value to derive a capitalization rate. A market area capitalization rate is developed by averaging the derived capitalization rates from 2 or 3 comparable investment properties. Refer to market-derived capitalization rate for an example of a market-derived capitalization rate. Formula: market-derived capitalization rate NOI percent market value equals capitalization rate. Apply the capitalization rate to derive an indication of value. The appraiser divides the subject property's NOI by the market-derived capitalization rate to obtain the capitalized value. NOI percent capitalization rate equals value. Example, using the NOI derived and reconstructed operating statement of $152,124 and the capitalization rate estimated in market-derived capitalization rate of 0.076. The estimated value of the property is $152. 124.0% .076 equals $2,001,632. Value reconciliation and final value estimate. Reconciliation is the process of evaluating and weighting each value indication obtained from the three approaches to value. The appraiser will have three indicated values, one from each approach. The appraiser reconciles the three indicated values into a final estimate of value. The reconciliation process requires that the appraiser consider each approach's relative applicability and the source of the data collected in each approach. The appraiser evaluates the data's reliability and decides which approach is best suited to the specific appraisal assignment. The appraiser performs a weighted average from the alternative indications of value that best represents the subject property. Example: assume the appraiser has applied all three approaches to the appraisal of a 2-year-old single-family home located in an established neighborhood. The appraiser was able to locate 5 recent comparable sales. The sales comparison approach is likely the most reliable indication of the subject property's worth because the comparables were actual sales in the same neighborhood. The indicated value using the sales comparison method is $160,000. The appraiser also finds the cost approach reliable for valuing the subject property. The homes in the neighborhood are similar in style, construction, and age. The subject property is only 2 years old, so there is little accrued depreciation. The indicated value from the cost approach is $155,000. The appraiser was able to apply the income approach using rental data obtained from 2 homes in the same neighborhood. However, the subject property is being sold as a single-family home that will be owner-occupied, based on mortgage financing obtained for the purchase. Therefore, the appraiser decides that the sales comparison approach and the cost approach are the most relevant approaches for this assignment. The appraiser assigns 10% weight to the indicated value of $150,000 based on the income approach. The appraiser reconciles the various data to obtain the final estimate of what the subject property is worth. In the final reconciliation, the appraiser used a weighted average, giving the most weight, 55%, to the sales comparison approach, 35% weight to the cost approach, and just 10% weight to the income approach. See final reconciliation of the 3 approaches. Summary of important points: the sales comparison approach is based on the premise that the value of the subject property can be estimated by reviewing recent sales similar to the subject property and comparing those properties with the subject property. In an arm's-length transaction, the parties deal from equal bargaining positions. A fixture is an item that originally was personal property but has been permanently attached to or made part of real property. A trade fixture is an article a commercial tenant attaches as a necessary part of the tenant's trade or business. When a transaction price has been adjusted for financing and conditions of sale, the resulting price is the normal sale price. The normal sale price is the price a property would have sold for at the time of the transaction if the transaction had been consistent with the market. The market conditions adjusted normal sale price is derived by applying an adjustment for market conditions to the normal sale price. The final adjusted sale price is derived by making adjustments for location and physical characteristics to the market conditions adjusted normal sale price. The cost approach is based on the theory that a knowledgeable purchaser will not pay more for a property than the cost of acquiring a similar site and constructing an acceptable substitute structure. Reproduction cost is the cost to build a structure that is an exact duplicate of the property being appraised. Replacement cost is the cost to construct improvements of equal utility to those being appraised, although not the exact physical duplicate. The 3 methods used to estimate building costs are quantity survey method, unit in place method, and comparative unit method. Effective age is the age indicated by a structure's condition and utility. Economic life is the total estimated number of years that an improvement is expected to contribute to the property's value. Accrued depreciation is composed of physical deterioration, functional obsolescence, and external obsolescence. The most common way to estimate accrued depreciation is called the age-life method, which applies a ratio of effective age and economic life to the structure's reproduction cost nu. The gross rent multiplier, GRM, is the ratio between a property's gross monthly rent and its selling price. The gross income multiplier, GIM, is the ratio between the property's gross annual income and its selling price. The income capitalization approach develops an estimated value based on the present or the future income from the subject property. The approach capitalizes net operating income into value. Potential gross income, PGI, is the total annual income a property would produce if it were fully rented and no collection losses were incurred. Effective gross income, EGI, is calculated by subtracting vacancy and collection losses from the PGI. Net operating income, NOI, is the income remaining after subtracting operating expenses from EGI. The three categories of operating expenses are 1. Fixed, 2. Variable, and 3. Reserve for replacements.